Never losing your temper isn't the same thing as being well. We treat those as one. The colleague who never snaps, the parent who never raises a voice, we call that maturity. In 1994, psychiatry filed a quiet counterexample. That year, the American Psychiatric Association's diagnostic manual added an illness under a Korean name, spelled the way Koreans say it, Hwa-byung. Hwa is the Korean word for fire, and in daily speech it's also the word for anger itself. Byung means illness, the fire illness. Its patients are, almost by definition, the people who never snapped. They describe years of keeping every room calm while something hot collected in the chest, tightness there, a pressing up feeling toward the throat, heat, sleep that won't come. Nothing dramatic ever happened, that was the point. Nothing was ever allowed to. If people call you easygoing, and only you know the difference, tonight is yours, and I hope you'll stay. Now, we swallow for a reason. The only alternative anyone shows us is the yeller, the door slammer, the one whole offices tiptoe around. Between those two, swallowing looks like adulthood. But anger has been on trial for 23 centuries, and those were never the only options. Tonight, I'll give you the prosecution, the defense, and the evidence that finally arrived. And at the end, a single question that replaces both the swallowing and the shouting. Because those two options were never really two. Both leave the fire where it is. We just keep choosing the quieter one, and year after year we get better at the swallowing, and worse at remembering there was ever anything to swallow. The prosecution's case is the famous one. It was written in 1st century Rome by Seneca, a Stoic philosopher and tutor to the Emperor Nero, in a treatise titled On Anger. His verdict fits in 3 words. Anger is a brief madness. Not a message with poor manners, a madness. And you don't ration madness. You remove it, root and all, no exceptions, no right amount. You already know the prosecution's voice, even if the name is new. Count to 10. Be the bigger person. Don't give them the satisfaction. It's advice with a clean promise. Master the fire, and you'll be free of it. What it doesn't mention is where the fire goes while you're mastering it. But the defense filed its brief 400 years before the prosecution ever spoke. Aristotle. He's the philosopher who tried to catalog, one by one, the traits a good human life requires. When the catalog reached anger, in the 4th book of his Nicomachean ethics, he found something odd in the language itself. Every virtue, in his method, sits between 2 failures, an excess and a lack. The excess of anger had a name. Greek could point at the hothead. But the lack, the person who can't get angry at anything, who absorbs everything, that had no name at all. The language had never bothered to mark it as a failure. Aristotle marked it. A person like that, he wrote, comes across as a fool. And then he chose a heavier word. Such a person is slavish. To endure being insulted, he wrote, and to put up with insults to one's friends is slavish. It's worth sitting with that for a moment. The philosopher who measured virtues for a living looked at the person we praise, the one who takes it, absorbs it, keeps the peace, and saw someone who had given something away. Because anger, on his account, is how a wrong registers. It's the felt half of your sense of justice. Feel none of it, ever. And the problem isn't that you're calm. It's that something in you has stopped keeping score of what's done to you. The defense had a name for getting this right. Praiotes. Gentleness, roughly, but a gentleness with a working alarm. Gentle by default, and still capable of fire at the right target. For Aristotle, the right anger wasn't a lapse of character. It was character, doing one of its jobs. Which means the question was never whether to feel anger. It was whether the anger you feel can still read what happened, aim at it, and stop. For a long time, that's where it stood. 2 philosophies, no referee. Then the referee showed up, wearing a lab coat. One honest caution before the evidence. No experiment can test, uproot anger entirely. That's a life's project, not a lab condition. What research can test is the habit we actually live by, the one that survives offices and family dinners. Feel it, but don't show it. And that habit has been measured. In 2003, two psychologists named Gross and John published 5 linked studies on how people handle their own emotions in one of psychology's flagship journals. They compared 2 habits: suppression. The feeling comes and you flatten it, out of your face, out of your voice. The nod in the meeting, the no worries that isn't true. The evening spent being pleasant at a table where something unfair was said an hour earlier. And reappraisal. You go back to the event itself and read it differently, so the feeling changes where it starts. The suppressors' results made grim reading, less positive emotion felt and shown. The negative feelings they kept flattening didn't fade. If anything, there was more of them. Their relationships came back thinner, less closeness, less support around them, lower well-being all the way down the list. The rereaders showed the opposite pattern: more of the good, less of the bad, warmer ties to other people. In those studies, flattening a feeling didn't subtract it, it deleted the outside and kept the inside. Someone inside is quietly paying for the peace the room sees, which brings the fire illness back around. Patients with Hwa-byung describe that same arithmetic sustained for decades: keep the harmony, hold it down, until the body files the report the voice never did. Roughly 4% of Koreans live with it, most often middle-aged and older women. Their accounts read like the 2003 findings stretched across a lifetime. So the court finally has evidence, and on that evidence the defense is ahead. The person who feels nothing isn't a success story, and the person who feels it and hides it is paying, in mood, in relationships, and, if the patients are right, in the body. But it's worth reading what the defense actually argued, because this is where it's easy to walk away with the wrong prize. If hiding anger loses, the obvious conclusion is that showing it wins. Screaming alone in a parked car, the reply typed in capital letters. And on this point, strangely, prosecution and defense agree: no. Aristotle's entire framework was the middle. Anger, he insisted, must stop before the point where it overthrows reason. The right anger is proportionate, sized to a real injustice, aimed at it, and then done. In other words, the hothead isn't the corrected version of the swallower. He's the same failure, running in the other direction. Proportion was the whole discipline. A cashier's mistake doesn't deserve a courtroom voice, and a real betrayal deserves more than a sigh. Matching the size of the response to the size of the wrong is, on Aristotle's account, what separates anger from noise. And the winning habit in the evidence was never venting either. It was reappraisal, rereading the event. Sometimes the second reading shrinks the anger honestly. It wasn't aimed at you, it wasn't about you. And sometimes the second reading confirms it. A line really was crossed. Either way, you come out knowing something, which is more than either swallowing or shouting ever taught anyone. So here's the question I promised, the one that replaces both. The next time the heat arrives, credit taken, a promise casually broken, a remark with a blade folded inside it, you might try giving it one breath and then asking it, quite literally, what's being treated as unfair here? If no answer comes back, it was traffic, it was tiredness, it was a stranger's bad day brushing past yours, then the anger was weather, not news. It can pass. You haven't swallowed anything, because there was nothing to keep. But if an answer does come back, that was my work, that was our agreement, that was beneath how we treat each other, then the anger was a report. And reports deserve filing, not with heat, with a sentence, short, early, addressed to the right person. I'd like my name on that. That's not what we agreed. I know sentences like those come out heavier than they read. They can be said quietly, quiet, on time, in the right ear. That's the whole delivery. And even when it changes nothing outside you, something is different afterward. The report was filed, not buried. You did the part that was yours. The fire doesn't need to be swallowed. and it doesn't need the whole room. It needs a reader. Which brings us back to the easygoing person, the one everyone praises, the one only you know from the inside. Somewhere we picked up the idea that adulthood means becoming fireproof. The Greeks, remember, never even named that condition, and when a philosopher finally stared straight at it, he reached for the words fool and slavish. Maybe being an adult was never about having no fire. Maybe it's about being the one your own fire reports to, its reader, not its fuel and not its prisoner. That's a quieter kind of strength and a rarer one. So the next time someone calls you easygoing and you feel the small distance between the word and the truth, it might be worth asking whether there's a sentence in you that still deserves to be filed. 23 centuries ago, the defense wrote down the standard it should meet: to feel anger at the right time, about the right things, toward the right person, for the right end, and in the right way. Thank you for staying with me all the way here.